For much of his political career, Donald Trump carefully cultivated an alliance with America's conspiracy-minded fringe. He didn't just tolerate them for his political purposes. He activated them, stoned them. He brought them out of the shadows. He fed their fears. He made them feel seen. He launched his political rise on the lie of birtherism, the idea that Barack Obama was a Kenyan-born Muslim. Now, let me tell you from a place of authority, I actually am a Kenyan-born Muslim, and for what it's worth, Barack Obama was never at any of the meetings. But Trump knew that. It was just a ploy, signaling early on that he was willing to go wherever the fringe's paranoia would take him. He tapped into the same voter base that was convinced that a global elite protected by the deep state was running a dark web of trafficking and exploitation. It started with a conspiracy about Hillary Clinton, who was, they alleged, running a pedophilia ring centered in the basement of Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria in D.C. On December 4th, 2016, a gunman from South Carolina entered the pizzeria to rescue the children from the basement. Shots were fired. There were no children. There were no pedophiles. The restaurant didn't have a basement. That conspiracy, Pizzagate, was a bust. But what wasn't a bust was the conspiracy that Trump and his supporters helped flourish with Jeffrey Epstein at its center. Trump gave the Epstein conspiracy's wildest belief airtime. In return, they backed him. They reposted, they voted, they got elected. He got elected, in part on the strength of a base of conspiracy theorists he groomed. But now he's president again, and those same conspiracists are becoming a big headache for him. They're out of control, and he's poised to toss them aside. He's lashing out at some of his most loyal supporters, calling them stupid, foolish, weaklings, all because they are pressing him on one issue, the Epstein files. This isn't just another kooky day in MAGA land. This moment marks a significant rupture. For all his authoritarian instincts, Trump has always relied on one illusion, that he was one of them, a truth teller, a rebel, a man fighting the man. But that was always a con. Trump never saw the base as partners in a cause. He saw them as marks. A means to an end, a block of loyal, gullible voters he could exploit to win power that he couldn't and wouldn't have won without them. Now that his own base is turning the lens back on him, what they're seeing is just another rich, powerful man protecting himself. And Trump knows that that's what they see. That's why, even as he insults them, he still tries to manipulate them, floating a brand new conspiracy, that it's all just a setup, this Epstein stuff. During a press conference in Scotland on Monday, Trump called the growing outrage over the Epstein files a hoax. And then, in classic fashion, he pointed the finger at the previous Biden administration, claiming they may have tampered with the evidence, that they could have, quote, easily put something in the files that's a phony, end quote. But this time, the excuses and the distractions don't seem to be working. Because the Epstein story doesn't divide neatly along left versus right lines. It cuts much deeper for MAGA diehards. This isn't about politics. It's about power. It's about who gets protected in the system. And you can hear the disillusionment in the voices of the same right-leaning influencers on whom Trump once counted. Joe Rogan, arguably the most influential podcaster in America, hosted Trump before the last election. He once defended him. Now he calls the Epstein scandal a line in the sand. He's accusing the Trump camp of gaslighting the public. Comedian Andrew Schultz, who also gave Trump a warm podcast welcome back in October, had this to say to his listeners last weekend.
If I wanted to vote for somebody that was going to keep the Epstein files under wrap, that was going to extend the foreign wars and was going to increase the budget, I would have voted for Kamala.
Theo Vaughn, another major voice among the younger male demographic, is openly calling out GOP lawmakers for shielding Trump on Epstein. These are the very same voices Trump relied on to reach young, independent men, and now they are calling him out. The numbers back up this shift. A Washington Post poll this week found just 38% of Republicans approve of Trump's handling of the Epstein files. Even among MAGA Republicans, it's only 43%. And a Yahoo YouGov poll published on Thursday found that a whopping 67% of Americans believe the government is hiding information about Epstein's death. Trump's once invincible MAGA machine is glitching. Even the QAnon shaman has turned on him, calling Trump a fraud. I mean, when you've lost the QAnon shaman. This is the same base from which Trump once bragged he would not lose any voters, even if he were to stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone. Well, now he's aiming at them, mocking them, gaslighting them, calling them names. And guess what? He's losing them. That's what makes this scandal different. The hush money, the tariffs, the authoritarian power grabs, even January 6th, through it all, many of his followers convinced themselves it was all part of the plan, that Trump was still one of them. But the Epstein files have shattered that myth. Now even his most loyal supporters are seeing Trump for what he has always been, not a crusading outsider, just another rich guy in power now, protecting himself. Predictably, Trump's propagandists are scrambling to clean up Trump's mess. His White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, Trump's fiercest hype woman, has been deployed to wave it all away. On Thursday, during a White House press briefing, she insisted that the Nobel Committee hand over a peace prize to Donald Trump. After all, she says, Trump has ended 6 conflicts.
The president has now ended conflicts between Thailand and Cambodia, Israel and Iran, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, India and Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, and Egypt and Ethiopia. This means President Trump has brokered, on average, about 1 peace deal or ceasefire per month during his 6 months in office. It's well past time that President Trump was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Except that those conflicts are still very much ongoing, not to mention that Trump nearly triggered a war with one of them. As the New Republic's Greg Sargent put it this way, quote, "We can always tell when Trump is in a shaky situation when Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt rushes in to praise him with absurdly over-the-top obsequious flattery. And boy, she did not disappoint this time." Leavitt isn't alone in this political theater, by the way. The sort of shunned, the shunned conspiracist Kash Patel, now head of the FBI, has conveniently reappeared this week to let us know that he stumbled into secret burn bags of Russia documents in some locked room somewhere. And then there's the sort of shunned director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who's working hard to get back into Trump's good graces by resurrecting the long-debunked claim that Barack Obama manufactured evidence in Russiagate. The desperation is as palpable as it is revealing. What you're witnessing are the reflexes of a White House in crisis, grasping for any narrative that might stick. And it all begs one simple question. If Trump has nothing to hide, why is he hiding? Because the problem isn't Obama. The problem is not the media. The problem is not burn bags at the FBI. The problem is not the Democrats. The problem is the perception among Trump's own base that he is covering something up. In his book, The Conspiracy to End America, Stuart Stevens, a former GOP strategist, writes, quote, "In Donald Trump's world, to be an American was to be a victim of powerful forces, globalist conspiracies, and wealthier countries. Electing Trump was an act of grievance, a way to settle the score," end quote. But what happens when the man you handed the keys to power starts pushing policy after policy that hurts the very working class Americans that he claimed to protect, slashing the social safety net, gutting the protections that stand between everyday people and corporate predators? Stevens offers this warning, quote, "The collapse of American democracy is like the pandemic. Whatever you say at the beginning will sound alarmist, but likely prove inadequate by the end," end quote. Sit with that for a moment. Whatever you say at the beginning will sound alarmist, but likely prove inadequate by the end. Stewart's follows with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. In 1864, President Lincoln wrote, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. We should listen and act accordingly." With more on this, I'm joined by Stuart Stevens himself, senior advisor for the Lincoln Project. He served as the chief strategist for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. He's the author of numerous books, including The Conspiracy to End America, 5 Ways My Old Party is Driving Our Democracy to Autocracy. Stuart, welcome back to the show. Thank you for being with us. You describe very well Trump's political appeal as being rooted in grievance. But many of the people who supported him because of that are now feeling conned. Something has changed.
Yeah, look, I think that there's a dividing line here in society, that the pro-pedophile section is pretty small. And, you know, Trump has always had this ability to and need to humiliate people. I think that a lot of the reasons he appoints people like Pete Hegseth or RFK Jr. is not because he doesn't know that they're idiots and are going to hurt America. He does it to prove that he can break these Republican senators and make them do what they know is wrong. And this is a moment where if you don't say this is wrong, if you don't call on Donald Trump not to pardon Maxwell, you're for it. That's the assumption, because you went along with everything else with Trump. So I think this really is a different moment for Trump. And I think it's a moment where you either have to say everything that we believed about the world was wrong and Donald Trump was right, or you have to say, well, there are pedophiles there. What, are we going to find out who they are? I mean, the answer to most people is, are you on the Epstein list? Most of us have a pretty easy way of just saying no. I think it's going to come down to when these congressmen and senators who are vulnerable, and it's an increasing number for a lot of factors, feel that they can't defend Trump on this. And what Democrats need to be doing is asking each of these Republican senators and congressmen, are you for pardoning Maxwell or not? It's an easy answer. It's a yes or no answer. And if you are not for it, then you need to tell the president not to do it. The same with moving Maxwell. The same with releasing all of the Epstein information. And this idea that Democrats are somehow hesitant about this, I think you sort of passed that moment. I think now they've sort of turned this corner where let the chips fall where they may, which is exactly where they should be.
Right.
So go to these districts. Ask the pastors of the churches of these congressmen and these senators where they stand. And I think that really hurts these people at their base. A lot of politics is about small numbers. And when you look at these districts, Trump can't lose very much of these voters. And I think it's going to hurt him.